Hello, happy Wednesday, everybody, and welcome to the March 14th Leadership live stream. We are going to be talking all this month about healthy habits of leaders, and today we're talking specifically about community. So that's what we're going to be chatting all about today. I'm inviting Jessie to come join us. Hopefully she'll get that invitation. Hey Fiona, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. If anyone else is watching, I see we have a few people watching. Just give me a shout so I know this is all working and good. And I'm going to share this in all the places. Hey Linda, how's it going? Hey James. It shows me sometimes your names, but sometimes it does not. Okay, bringing Jessie in. Hope everyone's having a great week so far. I've had a fun week. My parents have actually been in town. Hey, Jessie.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. How are you?
Good. Glad that this seems to have worked without any issue for once.
I know. It's doing well. Community, a great TV show. Please should watch it.
True story.
A good laugh. Yes, that is true. All right, I'm going to post this in a few places here. I'm going to post this in the event we got started.
Beautiful. I will share it out into my places. And so for those of you who are joining us live, thank you for being here with us. We really appreciate it. And especially because the topic this week is community. So we really appreciate having members of our own community here to catch us live. Well, hey, Fiona, I'm glad you caught us despite the weird time zone things that happen with daylight savings time. So all this month, we are talking about leadership habits. Last week, we talked about reading as a leadership habit. This week, we're talking about community as not just a leadership habit, but a leadership reality. Because leaders not only create and cultivate community, but they're also often part of a community and follow other leaders and are part of a lot of different types of community. So today we're going to be talking about a few different things. We're going to talk a little bit about what we mean when we say community, and I excel in the weird zone. Me too, Fiona. We're going to talk about the different types of communities. There are what we mean when we say community. We are going to quickly recap a live I did yesterday about the 3 things that all healthy communities have, and maybe expand upon that a little bit so that Marie can have her say, since it was just me blabbing. And we're going to talk about what leaders can bring to their own communities, how leaders can set up boundaries within the communities that they're a part of, and what the difference is, like what it looks like when you are the facilitator of a community versus what it looks like when you are just a participant in a community, because those are different roles and we take on different responsibilities in those different roles. So we're going to go over all that good stuff today.
Exactly. Cool. So as a recap, like Jessie said, we're talking all this month about healthy leadership habits. And so if this is something that's interesting to you, please feel free to head over to our events page over on the Thought Leaders Think Tank, and you can sign up to get notifications. We'll be doing one more live stream like this, not next week at this time, but the week after, to talk about our final healthy habit of leaders. And then next week, you can actually join us for something a little different, which is our roundtable discussion. So we will, instead of be hopping on Facebook Live, we'll be opening up a Zoom room for everybody who wants to come join. Hey, Jason. For everybody who wants to come and join us there, we can talk all together as peers, as leaders. We can discuss leadership habits and talk about those influences in our lives, maybe bring some more to the table that we haven't been thinking about or haven't been talking about, and we can really dig into that all together instead of just having Jessie and me have the Jessie and Marie show. So yes, please head over to the events tab so that you get notified for that if you're interested. All right, so let's dig into this week's healthy leadership habit of community. And I feel like this is one of those that first out of school, I probably would not have ever considered a leadership habit. I just sort of thought, well, leaders know what's going on. They don't really need support. They have a lot of experience. They have a lot of knowledge. why would they need community? And I discovered through working with some mentors that I was totally wrong about that. Yes, the Jessie Marie Show, 10 out of 10. Oh, thank you, James. That's high praise. I don't know if I would watch it again, but appreciate that. So we talked a little bit about mentors in this group. I think actually Vix was bringing up a question about mentorship. But that was sort of my first foray into community in sort of a professional sense, where, I joined some professional groups. I was part of a membership for my field. I absolutely had colleagues that I loved and enjoyed working with. I was part of a team. But when I actually had a few mentors really step up and go above and beyond for me and help me learn so much, even if we were doing totally different things, but just really nurture me, I started discovering the importance of community for me in those professional realms and personal, right? Those mentors are also personal friends. And those are the people that I think of most fondly, I keep in touch with over the years. So I think that was sort of my first foray into the importance of community as a budding leader back in my just out of university days. What about you, Jessie?
I think I've been a part of a lot of different communities, but it's always sort of been an unintentional attendance, I suppose. I was never the sort of person who actively sought out a community, and I mentioned this a little bit in the Facebook post that I did, I think on Tuesday, so yesterday, where my first community was sort of the community of all the uncool kids. It was like we got to middle school and all of the cool kids sorted themselves out and we were the leftovers, and we just sort of banded together as the uncool kids, who are still some of my dearest friends today. They're all amazing people. But what we had in common to form our community was we were all bullied by the cool kids, and so there's strength in numbers. So that was sort of my first experience with community. And then as I got older, I sort of had the same experience over and over. Not that I was always the uncool kid, but that I always sort of ended up falling into the community that made the most sense for me at that time in my life. And I think this goes into something we'll talk about later, which is boundaries. But I didn't want to spend time in communities that didn't make sense with me or for me. And that reminds me of something Rochelle said when we were first talking about communities earlier this week, which is that she has struggled with finding in-person community. And I totally feel that. I'm the sort of person who I'll get really excited about something, go once or twice, and then stop going. So really where I found my core community, where I've always found my core community, has been online. I am a millennial, but that didn't stop. So I was born in 1986, and when I was 2 in 1988, my dad got us our first family computer. So I am a child of the internet. I got my first AOL account when I was 10, and from that point on was absolutely obsessed with being online and talking with people. I formed my first communities online. I started my first email newsletter when I was 11 or 12, sending an e-zine out to people that talked about like
boy
the
bands,
next Animorphs books, and the Backstreet Boys tour information. But it was an opportunity for me to connect with people when I didn't feel like I had a lot of people in my in-person community. And so becoming an online entrepreneur obviously was like an easy decision for me because I've always found my community in online spaces back when it was AOL 3.0 and definitely not the cool thing to do. But that has been my experience, is that I find community in the places where people who struggle to find community go.
And it seems like too, it's a lot of it is because you have shared interests and experiences, and even if you're not necessarily explicit about listing all of those out, it's helpful, right, to build that bridge of connection and to find some common ground. So it looks like sort of we've done that unintentionally here. Linda and Amy are both claiming their seat at the Uncool Kids table with both of us. I think that makes us pretty awesome, let me just say. But that's, I think part of it is just sort of having a welcoming attitude, having an open mind. realizing that we can learn so much from everybody, and that regardless of what somebody's experience is, exactly a shared outlook on life, we can have totally different lives, but we can still have so much in common. And Fiona there is nodding with you that she's also found her tribe online, in groups, including this one. So, we want to provide that for people. We ourselves have felt like outsiders at many points in our lives. And there's times when we've only felt like we're a part of things because we, at least initially, until those connections were made, because we paid into it, or just because we kept showing up, or because we didn't have anywhere else to go, or felt like we didn't. But it's really what you make of that opportunity, and it's what you make of that community. So one that's coming to mind for me right now is my writers group. Also pretty sure, I love every single person in that group, and I'm also pretty sure they would have totally fit in with us at our Uncool Kids tables, respectively. I also had one of those for sure. Yes, the fancy girls were called the Flamingos. We didn't even have a name. We were just like the other people. That was us. They even had a mascot. Literally, it was painted on the side of one of the girls' pool houses in honor of it. So it was very fancy. Anyway,
that's special.
I was supremely jealous until I realized these are the people that I still meet up with now. Actually, I was just texting with them because I found some old photos from a New Year's Eve party, about 25 years ago, from this group. So a lot of fun. But anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, that we strive to create that community. And for instance, my writing group is where I was going with this. Part of the reason that now I feel a part of that writing group, it's a local in-person fiction writing group. We meet on Monday nights at a community center. It takes me 45 minutes to get there. It's not convenient to me, but I keep going because it's beneficial for me, right? I have somebody to actually look over my fiction and give me some feedback, but that's not why I keep going. I could get that anywhere. I keep going because it's become community for me, and I keep showing up. I've made it a priority. I've only missed 1 week so far since I made the dedication to myself to start going in January this year, because I had company in town and we were doing stuff. So, and I let them know ahead of time. I made a commitment to keep coming back, and these are now some of my closest friends in Albuquerque. So I think that's a big part of it, is what we bring to it. And I think that is a leadership quality that we have to sort of get over our fear, or sort of work through our fear, acknowledge it at least, and know it's okay. I can still try this, and I need to continue, giving it my all, at least for a little while, give it some time.
Yeah, and so I think that goes really nicely into this idea of what do we mean by community when we say community, and what does a community look like for someone who identifies as a leader? And so yesterday I did a live that talked about the 3 qualities of a community that's sort of headed in the right direction or on the right trajectory. And just to kind of quickly recap those 3 things, which I think is true of all communities, not just Facebook groups. I think in-person writing groups, the group of people we hung out with in high school, the people that we hang out with as our peer group today, all of these are communities. And to be positive, uplifting communities, they tend to have these 3 things. Thing number 1 is an investment in the community, or a presence in the community. So making it a priority, making it a non-negotiable, like Marie deciding to go to her writers group every week, even when it's not convenient, because it's a place where she feels like she belongs and it's important. That's the first thing, is just an investment in the community members being there and being present. The second thing is depth. So there's a depth of quality to the conversations that take place, to the discussions that take place, to the type of investment in the group. So there's depth in being within the community and having these conversations like the ones we're having right now, where we're not just skimming the surface of topics. And then the third thing is interconnectedness. So this idea that you're not just a part of the community because you want something out of it for yourself. You're actually in the community because you want to help lift one another up. So with the writing group, a great example, I'm in a writing group as well, and sometimes I don't have any of my fiction to bring because I haven't worked on anything in that last week. But that doesn't necessarily prevent me from going and listening to other people and providing them feedback. I'm not gaining anything out of that necessarily, like it doesn't look like I'm gaining anything out of it because I'm not bringing my own story to get critiqued. But I still want to give back and provide critique to other people who have taken the time to critique me and my writing in the past. So there's that interconnectedness, that idea that we all want to lift one another up, and it's not coming from a selfish place.
Totally. And I wonder if part of that is because, you know, we know how important that is to us. Like both of us grew up with those communities where all the time, you know, you didn't necessarily need something. Maybe someone else had been bullied or someone in your community needed some support that day, or they lost their lunch money or whatever, you know, all those things that happen when you're in school. And we give unselfishly to our friends without expecting anything in return. And so bringing those qualities forward and expecting and assuming the best about people, I think is really important to know. Like probably those other people in your writing group also would come for you if they didn't have anything, and that you're showing up more fully than is the bare minimum. You're showing up in a way that is very intentional, and it sets a really good precedent, I think, for the group. Even if you're not the leader, you can lead from within, and I think that's a great description of how that works in real life. I like this comment from Linda. I've always been drawn to startup communities and companies. I was a consultant for Discovery Toys when founder Lane Nemeth would come to Minnesota and give all 25 of us other consultants hugs and kisses. I love that. That's so cool though, right? That like the founder was wanting to be there, wanted to have a relationship, wanted to show up fully. That's one of the things that we've been working on in this community. It's that depth thing. That's why, hello, we're here right now doing this right now. Like we're going in depth into something. This is important for us. We really want to have interconnectedness where we're all lifting each other up and where we're supportive of each other. Obviously, that doesn't mean, it's just like the writing group, right? It doesn't mean we can't say, here's a few ideas or suggestions of other things you could do. Like there's always space for constructive criticism. But that doesn't mean, too, that we have to be beating each other down. There's a lot of groups run by copywriters out there that we're intentionally not a part of because it's all based around competition. It's all based around number games. And it's just not a good environment for us, right? Like it's not the kind of environment we want to create and cultivate. And so we just are intentional about where we spend our time and how we are trying to create a community and a culture of interconnectedness and positivity here.
Yes. I'd love to hear from the rest of you guys, whether you're watching live or on the replay. What sort of communities have you been drawn to sort of historically, or what kind of communities are you really finding yourself spending time in at this stage in your life? I'd love to hear sort of from the group where you like to spend your time and how you like to spend your time in those places, because that's kind of the next thing, which is what leaders bring to communities. And I love what you said, Marie, about this idea of you don't have to be the leader of the community to lead from within, which I think is so true, right? You can have leadership qualities and not be the person who's the assigned leader of the group. Every single person in this group I consider a leader in some way or another. That doesn't necessarily mean you're the admin of the group, but it means that you have a leadership quality that you can bring to the group, and you have something that you can offer and to achieve that interconnectedness.
Totally. So I'm going to draw from this book, which may start to look familiar to you guys. As you know, one of the authors, or as you may know, if you've been listening to us talk about The Art of Possibility, which is our book club book for April, I'm going to just give you guys a little preview of one of the stories in here. Benjamin Zander, who's one of the authors, the co-authors of this book, is actually the director of the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra. I think, James, you'll probably appreciate this example since I know you're a singer and musician. And he talks about second violin syndrome. So if you've ever been in an orchestra, Jesse is like, this is me, not true. She's a violinist.
This is me.
I'm a cellist.
I'm a second violinist.
So just like a super quick little like dip into what orchestral life looks like. If you're in a full orchestra with all the instruments, you know, brass, woodwind, string, percussion, everybody. There's certain instruments, just because of the nature of the instrument, like a trumpet, which is pretty loud, where there's only going to be 1 or 2 or 3 of them in the orchestra, depending on what the piece calls for. But generally speaking, each one of them is going to have different music. There's going to be sometimes where they're playing together, and sometimes where maybe only the first trumpet's going to be playing something. So they all are basically soloists. Stringed instruments, on the other hand, are pretty quiet, and so they get glommed together in these big sections. So if you look at like a floor layout of an orchestra, pretty much the first like half of the strings are violins, and half of those are second violins. And it's very easy for somebody who's in the middle of the pack or the back of the pack of the second violin section to feel like, you know, if I don't play, if I just kind of budget a little bit, no one's gonna know, right? And I was guilty of this as a cellist, right? Like sometimes I'd be like, this section's really hard. Not playing, like looking like I'm playing. You just lift your bow a little bit, do your fingers, it's all good. And then I joined a handbell choir, in which I was literally the only person with these 2 bells, and everybody in the choir was a soloist. And it made me realize that I really needed to bring my all to that. But if I wasn't also bringing my all to playing in an orchestra, and everybody did that, right? It's like if everybody just assumes everyone else is going to go vote, you suddenly have nobody voting. It's the same thing in an orchestra. And I think it's the same thing in business too, right? If you just kind of assume that other people are going to take up the slack, even if we're in the back of the pack is how we feel like, or if, in terms of community, if we're not facilitating a community, but if we are just a member of it, if we're not there putting our effort into it, then if everyone does that, what kind of community is it going to be? So I really liked that description from this book. It really rang true for me as a string player, but maybe it'll ring true for you guys too. Also, I'm seeing so many comments. Let me go back and check these out.
Yeah, so Linda says that she has always been pretty eclectic and is just starting to hone in on who is her tribe, who she really enjoys and trusts being around. I'd love to hear more about what you've sort of discovered in that process, Linda, because I think we all go through that. We all sort of dip our toes in different types of communities until we find the one that we hone in on. And Jason says, I do a property networking event once a month. It's great for in-person contact. People arrive around lunchtime, go home when they've had enough. That's nice that you can kind of come and go as you want. Really helps to get into broader conversation with people and connect on life, not just business levels. So important. Definitely end up having better conversations than you typically do across the desk from someone. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
When you get to know each other as human beings and you get to find out about their family and their interests and what makes them tick, it's so much more amazing. That's why we love in-person events. That's why we've actually started incorporating them into our programming, because you do develop those deeper relationships. And I love that you're a violinist too. That's awesome. Yeah.
Amy says, who doesn't?
Probably why I was fudging a bit.
That's why I was a second violinist. Amy says, I used to be very active in mom-type groups, band moms, etc. Now I'm networking with a huge group of other entrepreneurs locally and love the sense of community that that leader brings. We don't focus on exchanging business cards. We focus on building relationships. Yes, and that's the entire piece of the interconnectedness and the depth and the investment. Like, it's more about creating those relationships than it is about, ooh, take my business card and maybe, hopefully you'll give me business someday. There's something deeper there. Yeah. New to me is being part of book groups, and I'm enjoying it as a learning community.
Yay, and we're excited you've joined ours.
Yes, we're super excited for the book club next month and to have you as a part of that community. And then Fiona says, I came into the group to participate in the challenges. For those of you who are relatively new to the group, we sort of founded this group around doing week-long challenges to help you grow your business. Which were relevant when I joined, then became part of your mastermind, and my early posts in the group helped massively in terms of gaining confidence to be visible as a leader. I'm here now because I want to hear what you guys have to say and to support you and others who are refining their message and speaking boldly as leaders. Well, thank you, Fiona.
Yay.
That means a lot.
Yes, it does. It really does. And I think, too, it's another example of those relationships being built over time. We feel like we know you really well, Fiona, and I'm like, where's Lily? I gotta see my Lily pictures and all of that good stuff. And it's really helps you stay top of mind for us stay top of mind for you. It's great for referrals. It's great for community building. Like there's so many benefits, right? Especially in a business group for developing those actual friendships as opposed to just a one-off client relationship or, just sort of being a number in a group. Honestly, a lot of the time I don't know honestly how many people are in this group. I think it's some low four-figure number. Like I don't pay attention to that because I'm just excited that there's people in here who are participating, who are showing up, right? And who seem to be interested and getting getting benefit out of what we have to say around leadership and messaging. So that's what matters, right?
Absolutely. It's about the quality, not the quantity. And when you're talking about community, it's about the quality of the relationships, not the number of people that are in the group.
Nice. Oh, I'm glad that you picked up guitar, Jason. That's good. And yes, thank you, Fiona, and vice versa on referrals. Okay. I'm invested in your success, and I know that it's a mutual feeling. Absolutely. It comes across in your relationships with people in your community. And I think a lot of that too is not coming from a desperation mindset. So here's another way that leaders can bring themselves to community, is by giving people the benefit of the doubt and by believing in the people around them as they get to know them. So trusting and believing and being that sort of cheerleader and support system for people, not saying, hey, I'm going to cheer you on even as you're driving off a cliff. That's not exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about being a friend here. But really assuming the best of people and assuming that they're going to be those rising stars. And obviously, like, we need to know people in order to do that, because if we have integrity and we're going to be lifting up other people, we should know that they know what they're talking about, and that they have the best of intentions as well. So as we develop those relationships with people, like, it's super easy for me to say, like, yes, you need to go work with Fiona because A, she's like a really good human being. B, she's really good at what she does. Like, we know all this stuff about you, and it's no problem to send people to you. In fact, it totally makes sense, right? But like, if I didn't take the time to get to know you, and I didn't assume the best of you from the beginning, maybe I wouldn't be there. Maybe I wouldn't have that mindset around you and around everybody in the group. So I really think that's important to have. At least for me, it's really helped me to have that mindset. And I think it allows, like, when people feel like they're not trying to prove themselves to you, they can just be themselves, they're allowed to shine. That's so important, right? That's another piece of this book. So I don't want to keep giving away too much, but it's so good.
Yes. And I think too, it's not just about not, like, cheering them on as they're driving off the cliff. It's about being willing to step in and put your hand on their shoulder and pull them back from the edge. Right. It's about stepping into the sometimes uncomfortable leadership role within a community of acknowledging when something isn't quite right within the community or within an individual in the community, and reaching out and being that support system while still recognizing and maintaining your own boundaries. And that's a really hard thing to do. But it's also what I think really achieves that interconnectedness within communities, when you're willing to take that extra step, go that extra mile for someone, not just to be their cheerleader, but also to support them even when it's something that's harder to say or harder to do.
We're going to be digging into boundaries more deeply. That's sort of the one thing that I alluded to in the top comment here about, the description of the video today, about one thing that leaders always need to bring to the table. I want to read Linda's comment here first, though. So I assume this was groups that have been attractive for her. And I think I agree with this, right? Those who accept others with differences and are curious rather than condescending. So important, right? Spiritual on some level, vibrate at 600 or higher, which is the level of peace, act professionally, may or may not have a corporate background, etc. I like that that's sort of at the bottom of the list, right? Like, the background, the expertise matters, right? And like the willingness to learn and the willingness to step up and say, like, hey, there's things I don't know, and like leave that ego behind. But it's really about like the attitude that you bring and how you treat other people. It's so important.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And so when we're talking about that in terms of boundaries, so I kind of want to preface the boundaries conversation by circling back to something that I mentioned yesterday, which is the fact that this conversation is so important to us because we have been very intentional about changing the way that this community is run. Because we were not setting the boundaries and creating the space that reflected the community that we wanted to build. And so at the end of January, beginning of February, we made changes in here. And those changes were meant to reflect new boundaries that we have created for ourselves. And some of that was loosening boundaries and making a commitment to one another to be more present in the group and making a commitment to you to showing up in a different way. And some of it was tightening certain boundaries, saying we're not going to post these kinds of posts anymore. We're not going to allow people to be in the group who are not positively contributing in the way that really feeds the environment that we're trying to set up. So I think as we lead into this boundaries conversation, I want to kind of just acknowledge that context, that we've been thinking a lot about this. In fact, before we made the changes in the group, I remember when Marie and I were in Europe in early January, we were sitting around and just talking about how something felt off. And like it just like we were not as excited to show up in here as we wanted to be. And so that really precipitated the changes that we ended up making. And it all started with asking ourselves, how do we create a community that is invested, that wants to lift one another up, and that has the depth that we're looking for? And how do we create the right boundaries around that so that that community is there without taking up all of our time and all of our energy? Because at the end of the day, this community is still part of a business, and we still have paying clients to serve. We still have other communities that we're facilitating. So how do you create that balance, especially because in your lives, you have more than one community. You may have other Facebook groups, you have in-person communities, you have your peer group, you have your family, which is another type of community. So how do you create those boundaries so that you can be present in all of your communities in a way that makes sense for you?
Totally. Thank you, Rachel. That's really heartening to hear, especially from you, because this is sort of your wheelhouse and you're amazing at assessing communities. So grateful for that. So one of the things that we do, and we learned this from one of our mentors, Adrienne Dorison, is that when we are facilitating a community, it's important to set and communicate boundaries right up front. So one of the things, if you ever join or have joined in the past, those of you guys who've been in part of our paid programs in the past, you'll recognize this, or as we launch the book club, you'll see it again. We have a thing that we do called boundaries, quotas, and what am I saying? Boundaries, quotas, and
expectations.
Expectations. I was like, what is that third word? So we explicitly set boundaries around time, around what is and isn't part of the program, etc. We set quotas, like, okay, you're going to get this many calls, or these are the features, right? Like reiterating, so that you're not saying, didn't I get 18 calls with you? No, you got 16 calls, whatever it is, right? And then the final thing is expectations, which is saying, like, these are the boundaries we're putting around ourselves and you. And these are the expectations that we're bringing for ourselves and for you to be a part of this community and to show up in the way that the community is envisioned. So it's easy when you're a leader of a program to say, like, here's the stuff, like, here's the boundaries. I think it gets a little trickier when you're not necessarily facilitating it. And if you are a member and you're trying to lead from the inside without necessarily usurping someone else's role or community. So do you have any insights on that, Jessie?
Yes, I think it really goes back to that integrity piece you talked about earlier. So this is particularly true, I think, of peer communities where there is no set leader. And everyone sort of is both a leader and a participant in the community. It can be really easy to enter a situation where there's either a power struggle or, the flip side, no one is stepping up.
Yes.
There's a vacuum. Yeah, exactly. So I think in that situation, we all have a responsibility to set boundaries around how much time and energy we're putting into the community, but also an expectation of ourselves to be honest and in integrity. And a quick example that from our own experience is last year we started a peer mastermind group with a group of entrepreneurs who we all love. And over time, it became evident that our attention was elsewhere, and the community had become sort of a vacuum through no fault of anyone's, just that we all had so many different priorities that community didn't make sense anymore. So at some point, it became the responsible thing to do to step up and say, is this community working for us, or should we disband it and know that we're doing it with love and with intention for focusing on what makes the most sense for us? So it's not always easy. And I love what you said, Fiona. Yeah, being honest about those off feelings. And that's exactly what that situation was. And then taking the steps to course correct. So sometimes the situation is disbanding it because the community doesn't make sense in that form anymore. Sometimes it's changing things up like we did in this group. So it looks different, but being willing to step forward and say something doesn't feel right here, I think is really important, regardless of what your role is within the community.
Right. I mean, this is important for any kind of community, right? Like whether it's you with your significant other, that's a tiny community, but it's a community, and being able to speak up about that, about those moments where things are feeling uncomfortable, that's a leadership trait. If it's like Jesse was saying, if it's peer led and there's sort of a vacuum or there's a power struggle, I know that also happens. I was just talking with a friend of mine recently about that happening. It was ugly, but this person made some very powerful leadership decisions that I was just like so blown away by that fearlessness. But it's because things were out of alignment, right? And things were not there with their values. So anyway, so that was very, very cool to witness. And I think too, like our peer group that Jesse was talking about, it doesn't have to end poorly, right? Like we still have great relationships with these people. In fact, for instance, one of the people was Kate Boyd, who we actually just did a podcast interview with. Like we share each other's stuff. We are invested in each other's success. Like you were saying earlier, Fiona, we've maintained that relationship. You know, Anna Franzen was one of these people. We still Voxer back and forth, right? Like we maintain our friendship, and we have other ways. So we've now created different boundaries, and it just makes more sense on an individual basis to continue those conversations. And so sometimes that's all it is it's just saying like, maybe this format isn't working, but I still care about you and I want to be invested in your life and business and success. How can we make this work? And we're finding ways of making that happen, which is awesome.
Absolutely. And I think another piece of it too is, you know, in my experience, being in a community but not being the facilitator of the community, it is easy to get that second violin syndrome and sort of fade into the background of the community and not speak up. But what I've found is really helpful is to be intentional about forming a relationship with the person who is the facilitator of the community, and making sure that not only, especially in larger communities, but not only that they know who you are, but they know that you're invested in the community. And so as a quick example, when I was in college, I went to Ohio State, which was at the time the largest public university in the entirety of the United States. It was a small city. Very, very easy place to sink into the background and disappear. And that is exactly what I did. I could not tell you a single one of my professors' names. I never had a conversation with a single one of them. I went to class, I did my work, I got my grade, and I disappeared. My brother, who went to a smaller college, made it an intentional part of his college career to meet each one of his professors, to go to their office hours, to form a relationship with them. And as a result, he has this pool of people he can reach out to for letters of recommendation, for advice when he's looking for careers and things like that that I never felt like I had. And the professors felt like they had actually reached and, you know, improved upon a student. So there was a two-way street there of people getting a benefit out of it because the participant in the community made an extra effort, which is something that I didn't experience. Even today, I'm like, what professors? Like, I know I went to college. I don't remember much of it. I didn't talk to my teachers much.
It's true. I was like Sean, honestly. And as a result, I was able to cultivate a relationship with my very first mentor, who through her guidance and support, she encouraged me to do my first academic research project. She was getting a lot out of it because she really had a vision for the English department at Rice to have a requirement for a senior thesis. And it never happened before. So I was her guinea pig. And so it was great. She encouraged me to apply for a scholarship. I did. I was able to spend an entire summer doing research, traveling around the country. It was a lot of fun. She actually encouraged me after I defended the thesis and had finished writing it and everything was good. She encouraged me to actually apply to a graduate student conference. I had just finished my bachelor's degree. I was not a graduate student. And she encouraged me to apply. My academic idol was going to be there giving the keynote. I was like, there's no way I can do this, Dr. Levander. And she's like, you can do this. And so she encouraged me to apply and they accepted me to come in. I gave a talk. My heart was like this, but how would I ever have even had the nerve to apply without that encouragement, right? And so being willing to show up as a student, she didn't do that for everyone because not everybody did show up. Not everybody, came to her office hours. Not everybody chose her as their academic mentor, made that relationship. And so we poured into each other. I hope that she got a lot of benefit out of it as well, but I know that I certainly did. Skipping past here. Okay, I'm going to skip back to Rochelle's comment up here. Okay, that's leadership right there, stepping forward and saying what needs to be said. And then just below that, she says, I would love a peer mastermind, maybe every tip point in my business. Yeah, definitely come talk to us if you want some tips on how not to fail in it like we did. Fiona says, as you know, I had a business that failed because I didn't course correct. So being intentional on that is so useful. And I think that's part of it, right? Is having that be part of your story and having that be part of your experience that you can draw from. It wasn't a failure, right, Fiona? Because you've gained so much knowledge from it and you're able to move forward so much more intentionally now. Amy says, I had to set up boundaries for my parenting Facebook group, judgment-free, no parent bashing, safe place to ask questions. It's a small group and I'm proud of how supportive they are of each other. And that's because of your leadership, Amy. That's amazing, right? That's because they're reflecting back to you what you are sending out to them. That's so awesome. Rochelle says here that relationship with the facilitator is so important, or lack of relationship and stepping on digital toes. Yeah, that's true too, right? It's always good to have that relationship so that you make sure that you are going along with those expectations. Some leaders aren't great at being super explicit about the expectations, or maybe they're just not posted somewhere super visible. So just getting in touch and being this is cool. We appreciate that so much. Even 99% of the time, we're yeah, go for it. But we just appreciate it. Such a great example. Visiting office hours of professionals, such a big deal. Good teacher. Some teachers are the best. Yes, Dr. Carolyn Levander, my idol. Fiona says, one of the things I really noticed about coming into the online space over the past 18 months or so is the percentage of people who actually participate as opposed to reading or lurking is so small. Early days, I lurked a lot because I was just trying to see how it all worked. But as soon as I started to participate, I realized people were so warm and positive and helpful that I could support and encourage people likewise. And it cuts off for me. There's so much advantage. I can't see what it says after that.
There's so much advantage. I think sometimes people worry about the whole putting themselves out there and what they say falling on deaf ears. I love that when I've posted, you always react to my posts.
Yeah.
I love everything about this because I have a natural lurker tendency.
Me too.
And that's just my default. And I've been very intentional about pushing past that. So one of the first job I had after teaching, actually the only other job I've had other than this business, was at a museum. And I purposely took a job as essentially the equivalent of a door-to-door salesman or salesperson for field trips. I would go to schools and sell field trips. super uncomfortable, super not lurky, and especially being such a shy person and such a anxiety-ridden person when it comes to those sort of confrontations. But I knew that I was a lurker. I knew that if I took a job at a desk where I had the ability to disappear, I would never be a part of that community. So I took a job that forced me to become a part of the community, even though it was uncomfortable at first. But I think there's something to be said about spending that time lurking to see how things work and just going on the background and making sure that you understand the community and the values of the community and that it is the right community for you, so that when you do step up, it's in a really intentional way, as long as you get to the point where you take that action, whether the action is stepping up or deciding the community isn't for you and going elsewhere. If you end up stuck in lurker land, that's when you get this huge disproportionate amount of people who are participating to people who are not participating. And yeah, you're right. Not a lot of people participate in these communities, but the people who do are amazing people who have decided to step up.
Right. And if you're a lurker out there, like, know that we love you and we feel you. Like, we're lurkers too. There's certain communities, actually, like right now, I'm like in super lurk mode everywhere else because I didn't feel like I had the energy to show up the way I wanted to as a participant in other people's communities. Now I'm getting ready to gear up on that, but I want to be intentional about it. And I think that's the thing, is the intentionality. Mm-hmm. Yes, I have reconnected with that teacher. I have been out of school for about a decade now, and we email back and forth every year or so. So it's awesome to stay in touch with her. Fiona says it's all worked out perfectly for me now. A great learning point, though. I was not strong enough in my boundaries and vision before, and integrity is so important to me. Committing for the sake of committing is not something I'm ever going to do. And I think that's the same thing too, right? Is like just being uncomfortable and pushing yourself for the sake of being uncomfortable and pushing yourself. I guess it could be an interesting experiment, and you could probably learn a lot about like what you're capable of withstanding. But if that's not your goal, if your goal is just to be a part of the community and you want to be intentional about it, it's okay to lurk a little bit first, for sure. Yeah. Like, there's no problem with that. We do that if it's for the sake of intentionality and of like building up that courage. But like, know that like 99% of people are not going to bite.
Yeah, and I think as long as you are getting something out of the community and willing to offer something back, and it doesn't have to be something big. It could be, if we're talking Facebook groups, it could be just liking a post now and then, and that's it. Once we feel like we're not getting anything out of the community, if we're still in lurker mode, but there's clearly not a connection, that's when it's time, I think, to reevaluate your presence in the community, because the piece that we haven't really talked about here is sustainability within communities, because we are in a lot of communities. We have our relationships with our family. We have our peer groups. We have our online communities. We have our networking offline communities. We have our client relationships. We have so many communities that we are a part of. We need to make sure that we are setting those boundaries so that our participation is sustainable. That's one of the reasons why we set this live stream, because it is something that is on the calendar. We know we will be here every single week at this time doing this live stream because we have set the boundary that this time is blocked off for it. If we had said, we just want to pop on live stream and talk about leadership stuff when we feel like it or when we feel inspired to do it, you would not hear from us. Because
we know ourselves too well.
Yeah, and for some people they can do that, and that's totally great. That's amazing. But we know that we need a certain type of boundary to allow our involvement in communities to remain sustainable.
Exactly. And I wouldn't worry, Amy. She says most of my members are lurkers. I worry about them being not more active, but they're not leaving either. So yeah, no, I wouldn't worry. I think like so long as you continue to be consistent in how you're showing up, and the people who aren't lurkers, clearly you're getting benefit out of it, you will slowly be drawing those people out. And some people will always be lurkers. It doesn't mean they won't be clients. It doesn't mean they are not being affected and positively impacted by your message. So
most members of every community, at least online community, just like Fiona said, most members are lurkers. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just kind of the way the proportions play out. It's about the quality of the relationships you build, not the number of people in there. So even small groups, I think there's a lot to be said for the power of small groups, actually, before they get too noisy, when you can really have that impact.
Yeah. Michelle, you're so right. We haven't even touched on private conversations. That's so true, right? But that's another good place for boundaries. I can imagine that could get, I have seen that slip before too, right? Into places where it's uncomfortable. So like being willing to set those boundaries at the beginning is ideal, but it's never too late. It's never too late. I remember I had a client who I loved, and I loved their mission. It was a nonprofit. Jesse's like, I know who you're talking about. Amazing client, and like truly one of the reasons that I was able to go full time initially. And I did not set boundaries. And I still remember one of the best emails that sort of exemplifies what this relationship was like. Was an email that there was to a woman named Christina. And so there was like an email chain, and it had like the people, for some reason it was like in the subject line. And it literally said, because it was cutting off things, Christina got shortened to Christ somehow. And so it said Christ, urgent. Not even kidding. That is like what the subject line said. And urgent was in all caps. And there were about this many exclamation points behind it. That was the experience. And because initially I was so like, I just wanted the money. And like, also, like I said, I liked them. I supported their mission. And so I was like, yeah, I'll drop everything I'm doing. And I remember we were actually living in the RV at that point, and we were up in Alaska, and I got called in to work on this big federal grant, which we did not. Oh gosh, guys, the story is so heartbreaking. Anyway, I won't get into the whole thing, but let's just say I missed like half of a visit with my in-laws, who came all the way from Texas, flew up to Alaska to hang out with us, and I like missed huge portions of their visit, which was like so wonderful for them to come up, because I was working on this and I did not have the strength or the boundaries to say, this is not okay. I've learned since then. Don't be like me, guys. Don't be like me.
But I think we have to go.
Thing as a Christ urgent.
Yes, but I think we have to go through those experiences to realize where our boundaries need to be. Because when you look back on that, it seems ridiculous that you spent so much time working on this project as opposed to spending time with your family. But in the moment, it felt like the right decision. So sometimes we need that hindsight, or at least it felt like the only available decision.
Yeah, I didn't think I had a choice. I was wrong. You always have a choice, guys.
Yes.
Always.
Yes. Another thing that we learned from our mentor, Adrienne, that we repeat to one another often is there's no such thing as a true business emergency.
Yeah.
Unless you're like a doctor and your patient is dying, there really is not in your online business where you are a service-based person serving your clients, getting out there and sharing your message with the world. Yes, it's important, but there are not true emergencies very often. Yeah. We create the emergencies in our head, and then we think that everything is an emergency, and then we create a reality where there are no other options.
Yeah, and really what this is weak boundaries. So, yes, do what I say, not what I do. Exactly. Okay, I'm going to catch a couple of these, and I think we've probably hammered on boundaries strongly here, so we'll move on to the last portion of today's live stream. Yes, Marie, that's true too. Nothing at all wrong. This is from Fiona. With lurking and entirely up to the individual, because I'm the CEO of my own company. Time online is somewhat less than it used to be, less scrolling and more intentionally going to some places specifically, and lurking or not going in others. I think that's totally true. And I love that like actually lurking can be part of our strategy, right? Because like we're sussing it out.
Yeah, and I think too, I also am personally, my experience, I'm a more engaged person when I'm in the communities intentionally.
Yeah. Totally. I think it just went really slow and weird for you. Are you guys hearing us okay? Yeah, leaders don't ask of others what they wouldn't be willing to do for themselves. Okay, Jessie said her phone just died, so I'm going to wrap this up, guys. Because knowing from last week, I was not able to come back in once it kind of died on me. Facebook Live is weird like that. FYI, guys, if you bring somebody in through the native Facebook Live and like they get a phone call, that happened to me. Yes, and this is very true, right, Amy? Failure to plan on your part does not result in an emergency on my part. Whew, that's a hard one, right? Because that requires some hard leadership conversations. And then Fiona says, it's so funny when you get someone, this is back to lurkers, someone who says they've been watching your live streams and reading your posts for months, and you could have closed down your business thinking they were making no impact because hardly anyone reacted. Worth remembering that online there are more people watching and being impacted by your stuff than you realize. So true. One of my favorite things that we realized months into our last session of the Messaging Mastermind last year, I'm going to just call on her. Amy Pascal, we discovered that she actually found us because she was actually captioning our videos through rev.com. And it was like awesome, right? That like we were able to connect over that. Like it is the wildest thing, but it's so true. Like you never know who's watching. Yes, your emergency is not my emergency. Exactly. Okay. So I think that was everything we wanted to talk about around community as a leader, considerations for joining, leading, participating from any level of a community as a leader. If you guys have questions or more insights into this, drop in the comments. Please feel free to join us next week for the Zoom. If you're looking for a community that goes a little bit more in depth than this one, we would love to have you guys join us for the Intentional Leaders Book Club. That's at northstarmessaging.com/book club. We are closing the cart in a week. So you have 1 week to get in. We're excited at this point. We have, I'm going to count here. We have 10 folks in the group. Very excited. It's going to be a great group. Many of you are here watching today. If you're hearing this, this is my dog barking in her sleep, if you're hearing a weird sound. So James, we're excited you're going to be there. Amy, we're excited you're going to be there. Jennifer, if you're watching on the replay, we're excited you're going to be there. Rachel, Kyle, so glad to have you guys. Anne, can't wait to get to know you better. Thank you so much for introducing us, Amy. Tanya, Teresa, and Danielle, you guys are amazing. You know, we love you. Can't wait to have you there. Adrian Dorson's going to be joining us, guys, as a member. So we're just very grateful for all of you who have signed up so far and cannot wait to welcome more of you into the group. It is $57. You'll be getting a copy of this book that I keep talking about, The Art of Possibility. It has so many nuggets of wisdom. This book is amazing for leaders. It's just amazing for humans. You're going to want to like give it to everybody as the Christmas gift of the year. And we can't wait to discuss it with you guys. We're going to be inviting you into a community, right? And we're going to be talking about our quotas, boundaries, and expectations. So you can see that sort of process in action. We're going to be having a private Facebook group. You'll be getting the sort of Cliff Notes version of the book from us, as well as a recommended reading schedule. It's going to require just 15 minutes a day for you to finish the book in a month. It's not that long. As you can see here, it's not all that big. It's full of great nuggets. It's very digestible, super fun to read. Put it on your list, even if you aren't able to join us for the book club, which starts on April 2nd. And yes, you'll be getting also weekly emails from us, making sure that you're up on the reading schedule and pointing out some specific passages. So again, if you're super busy, if you aren't able to take the time to read along with us on the schedule, you can still participate fully in the discussion because we're going to just be highlighting the best nuggets, right, from the book so that we can talk through what are some of the greatest takeaways from this book. We're also going to be joining you guys in a weekly live stream in that private Facebook group to be talking about those passages and takeaways. And then there's going to be a book club discussion near the end of the month where we're all going to be coming together to really dig into the big issues that the book brings up and figure out how to implement them in our lives. Because if you're a leader, you need to read and you need community. And we really want to have that be facilitated through this group. It's a 1-month trial experiment. So come join us for the experiment, but we may be turning it probably, likely, hopefully, I don't know. I really love this idea. We both are excited about it. So we are treating this as if we're going to be turning it into an ongoing process. But if you want to be able to help lead from the inside and give advice, feedback, help us sort of parse through what this process is like of getting a lot of value out of a book that we're all reading together, we would love to have you join for that. So as a result, you'll be getting a special intro level price. If we do kick this into an ongoing thing, then you will, it would be a different price, a higher price. So we'd love to have you come in and join us. Again, it's northstarmessaging.com/book club. join us for reading The Art of Possibility. Love to have you there. Thank you guys so much for being here today. We appreciate you so much. You guys are all leaders. You're all showing up. You guys make this so much fun. So we love you all, and talk to you soon.